Let's hit it.
And welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation as usual as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
All right, here we go. What you think about, you will bring about.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I hope you enjoyed our opening music called Clarion Call. It's by the Mark Arneson Band featuring Maya Dore, and you can download that on any of your favorite music platforms. For those of you that are new to our show, we are about sound information, not just sound bites. Our goal truly is to talk to all, raising everyone's voice, big and small, around the world, from those diagnosed to those that care and serve them, to advocates, researchers, authors, and more. Today is a live show, so you can always call in at 323-870-4602. That's 323-870-4602. Now, before we get to our topic on feuding families and how to get them to a peaceful spot, I always like to do a couple of shout-outs. So I want to thank Coro Health, C-O-R-O Health, for allowing people to still be able to download two of their apps during the pandemic. And you're going to want to take advantage of that before this gets pulled off the page there. But you can download Music First and Coro Faith free. And again, just go to Coro, C-O-R-O Health.com. If you're looking for resources, one stop you might want to make is our Dementia Map. It's a global resource directory that can help you find that roadmap and develop that roadmap for your own personal journey there. We have all kinds of resources. It's free to use. And if you are a player in this industry, somebody who provides services, products, or tools, has written a book, maybe you have a YouTube channel or a blog, we would love you to become a member. There are both free and paid plans. And again, it's free to end users. So go to dementiamap.com. Also, you may be looking for support groups. The Memory Cafe directory has the majority of the memory cafes in 5 different countries listed. And some of those are starting to meet in person again, but you'll be able to find out who's meeting, are they in person, or, are they still online? So go to memorycafedirectory.com. We're going to hear from the Footbar Walker, and then we will be right back to talk with our guest.
Introducing the life-changing Footbar Walker.
I'm Peggy from Danville, Kentucky, and I'm 91 years old. The Footbar Walker revolutionized my care of George. The saving that I made from having to put him in a nursing home came to about $192,000. The Footbar Walker opens and closes just like a standard walker. The only thing that is different is the top bar and the foot bar. Does that ever make a difference?
Does someone you love use a walker? Do they struggle to get up from a seated position? Are you a caregiver dealing with physical pain and stress as you help your patient? The Footbar Walker was designed to assist not only the patient, but also the caregiver. Patients have more control standing up, and no lifting from the caregiver is required. See how it works at thefootbarwalker.com. That's thefootbarwalker.com. Peggy, would you recommend the Footbar Walker?
Do I ever? I would not be in the health that I'm in today at this age had it not been for the Footbar Walker.
Well, welcome back, everyone. We're going to talk about how to help feuding families become peaceful partners. And it can be a really complicated journey when you are navigating caring for someone else, and then add dementia into the loop, and it can really go awry sometimes. And not all families are equipped to do that on their own. So our guest today is Katharina W. and she is an adult, family, and elder care mediator and conflict coach. She is also the founder of Aging in Harmony, and she helps older adults and their families and their care partners navigate all of those difficult situations that can come about with aging. And she does this both in person and online. So, Katharina, welcome to the show today. I'm just thrilled to have you with us because I know a lot of families struggle in terms of how to give care and how to work as a team.
Thank you so much for having me, Lori. I really am glad that I'll be able to talk to your listeners today.
Wonderful. Now, before I get into my line of questions, I always like to ask everybody if they've been personally touched by dementia in their own family or circle of friends.
Yes, I have. I have a sister who has dementia. She lives in England. And, being in the field of aging, I noticed the signs much before anybody else either noticed or was willing to acknowledge. And it's been really sad because, I'm far away, and it's been a few years since we can't talk anymore. Her speech was affected, and so she doesn't feel comfortable talking on the phone anymore. So it's been really sad for me being so far away and not being able to help. But I think of her often, and I, do what I can to help other families who are closer geographically to me who have a loved one with dementia.
Oh, wonderful. Well, why don't we talk about your work? I really appreciate you sharing the specifics of your own journey there. What actually do you do as an adult, family, or elder mediator?
So, of course, and I'm sure your listeners do too, that a lot of families don't quite see eye to eye about what should happen to their aging loved ones, 5 family members, 6 opinions kind of thing, especially when you throw dementia into the mix. And it's hard to talk about those things. It's hard for anybody to have, any group of people, to have a conversation about a controversial issue on their own without a professional facilitator. So I'm basically trained to bring the family together to the table, the physical or the virtual table, and facilitate a conversation about all the decisions that need to be made, either with the older adults still being a partner in the conversation, or if they're already so far down the road of dementia that they don't participate in making decisions for their own life anymore, than just the adult children or whoever the decision makers are.
Okay. Now, one of the things I think that comes into play is sometimes people think mediation, they think court, so let's talk about the difference between, what's available to a family out there, and what's the difference between working with an attorney or a social worker or an elder care manager.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I often say facilitator instead of mediator because people associate with the word mediation legal conflicts. I really help people talk out any kind of conflicts, and my mission is to help families work it out so that they don't end up in the hands of attorneys or courts, especially, conservatorship is what's called in California, or adult guardianship court in the rest of the country. So an attorney, you need the help of an attorney to just make legal arrangements ahead of time, hopefully enough ahead of time that the adult can still assign somebody to make decisions for them. Or if they can't, then you may need an attorney to help you petition to, take control for your loved one's affairs. So that's when you need an attorney. An attorney is, an advocate for whoever contacts them. It could be the elder, and it could be somebody else who is petitioning to gain control over the elder's affairs. So that's the role of an attorney. Social workers can be really, really helpful in these situations, and they work with everybody in the family. However, they approach the situation as an advocate for the elder. Their goal in every conversation with the family is to find solutions that are in the elder's best interest. And that's not always very motivating to all family members because, a lot of families, not everybody cares about each other as much as we might like. And so, especially if when they were growing up, the parents may not have been the very best parents, adult children can be resentful if all of a sudden their life is supposed to revolve around what's best for their aging parent. And so the big difference of what I have to offer is that I'm a professional neutral. I try to talk to everybody individually first and hear their perspective and really give them the feeling that I understand where they're coming from without any judgment. And then I can bring them together and I can help them hear each other and understand where they're coming from without any judgment. So being a neutral really helps create understanding that somebody who is advocating for one side over another may not have.
Okay. Well, and I think it really is important to kind of get that neutral position in there when you're dealing with such complicated issues like family. Who usually, reaches out to help for you? Who is it in the family that is kind of the common denominator, or maybe there isn't one?
No, there is. I think it's typically the person who in every family takes the initiative about anything that has to do with planning for the aging loved ones. Most of the time it's an adult daughter, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Sometimes it's even a daughter-in-law if there's, if all the kids are sons. And so that person usually reaches out to me too when they're trying to get some conversations going or plans made and they're running into a roadblock.
Okay. And that makes sense, that it's kind of that lead horse trying to get everybody on track, because they're usually the organized ones, and they're the ones that kind of typically, in my opinion, see big picture, where maybe others in the family don't always see the big picture in the needs. Would you say that that's an accurate statement from what you see?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Again, I guess my perspective as a neutral, from that perspective, I would say, there in every family, everybody has their own role to play, and there's just usually one person who is more proactive. They're more proactive in every area of their life. That doesn't necessarily mean to me that they are big picture people. They are just proactive people. They don't like, the unknown. They like to be in control. They like predictability. So where other people may more be the reactive one who goes with the flow. All those perspectives, I think, are equally important because the person who tends to take the initiative can also be overly worried.
Okay, that makes sense. Who typically partakes in these elder mediations, or kind of coaching meetings? How is that handled? And who is invited? Is there anybody that's ever kind of left out and said, no, you can't participate in that?
Okay, I want to distinguish between three different services that I offer, and the answer to your question is different for each of them.
Okay.
So in an ideal world, I like it best when somebody contacts me when they're trying to make plans, but the situation hasn't fallen apart yet. And they're running into roadblocks where people don't want to talk about it, people don't think it's necessary yet. So in that situation, I offer to invite everybody to the table and offer what I call a facilitated family meeting, to make plans for the future, ask questions that people often don't think of yet at that time, help people figure out what resources they need to research, and then come back with the answers, and then hopefully agree on a plan of how to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Again, in that situation, it's probably the planner in the family who contacts me, and I ask them who else they think they should be involved, because ideally, if mom or dad aren't too far along the journey of dementia, everybody who's affected by a decision should be involved in making the decision. So if it's early enough, then, I asked for permission to talk to all the other family members who should be involved in the process moving forward, and I have individual conversations with them first, and then invite them to participate in a joint meeting, including, as I said, mom or dad. Almost always, I want to talk to mom or dad alone, even if they have already been diagnosed with dementia, and everybody in the family agrees that they shouldn't be involved in the process. It's still helpful for me to have a first-hand conversation with them so I can experience the situation from my perspective rather than from their perspective, which sometimes is, overly protective. It's my responsibility as an elder mediator to always involve the elder in the decisions affecting their life to the degree that is possible. So that's the facilitated family meetings, right? It's slightly different with what I call elder care mediation. That's when there already is a conflict. Some decisions have already been made. Maybe one sibling has power of attorney for the person, so they have to decide where mama gets to live and what kind of, or dad, and what kind of care they get. And another sibling has been assigned as power of attorney for finances. That's often the case. And that person has to agree to the costs that are caused by what the other person decides, right? So they have to work together, but they may not necessarily have the same view on what's necessary, and they may not ever have been able to work together very well. So that's an example for a situation where the one thing everybody agrees on is that there is already a conflict. The process is no different. I try to talk to everybody involved, and I invite them to participate in a joint conversation, but it's a voluntary process. So the hardest part in that situation often is to get people to the table. Now, the third thing of service I offer is what I call conflict coaching. That's typically just with one person. That can happen either because the person who first contacts me wants to learn some of my tools of the trade so they can facilitate the family conversation on their own, or it can happen because they or I have tried to enroll other parties in a joint conversation and they're not willing to. So then I offer a series of conflict coaching sessions with just that one person so they can learn to approach the conversations differently and hopefully get different results on their own. So that's a series of usually a package of like 5 or 6 hour-long sessions with just one person, with role plays and coming back, trying it out, coming back, trying it again, that sort of thing.
Okay. Well, that's really, really helpful. Why don't you tell us what are the most common issues that people come to you with? Because I think everyone thinks, oh, my gosh, I'm all alone. Ours is the only family that can't get along and work through this. But I would imagine you see some common themes.
Yes. very much so. And some of them are themes that I'm sure you see all the time too. One of the earliest thing that often happens, earliest concern is that somebody in the family thinks it's time for mom or dad to give up the car keys.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's huge resistance to that because driving your own car gives such a sense of independence that's very important to people in this culture. And so, some families just take away the car keys or disable the car or something like that. And that causes really deep hurt and strains the relationships. So I help having conversations about that, helping the elder understand that it's not necessarily about whether or not it is safe for them to drive, but that it is about how much their kids worry about them and how that worry affects their life. So that can be very effective. So that's often an entry point. Another one is when the elder lives alone. Most of the time, it's the women outliving their husbands, and the adult children are seeing signs of that worry them, whether they need help to enable them to keep living at home, or whether it may be time to move to assisted living or some sort of senior housing. Also to avoid the isolation, which is not good for people's health, including, the cognitive health. So that's another thing that often comes up. And again, because independence is such an important value in this culture, the elders, often really fight before they're willing to accept help, especially professional help. And the adult children, may live far away or are busy with their own families and their jobs and everything and can't do for mom or dad what needs to be done. So that's another very common issue. Another common issue is the one that I already mentioned earlier, conflicts between different family members who have either joint power of attorney or different types of power of attorney and don't agree on what's the best path forward. So those are three that come to mind right away.
Okay. Those seem like they would all be major issues. And I loved when you talk about the importance of independence and purpose, because sometimes I think that people forget about that and they just kind of get down to the task, but they're not thinking about how people feel about that after that's been addressed. And as important like as driving is, you have to deal with the whole person, not just the task. And I think that is real critical. In terms of, I would imagine a couple of things, but first I want to just remind our audience, if you have questions, you can go ahead and call in at 323-870-4602. That's 323-870-4602. But I wanted to ask, because I think some of our audience members are probably wondering about this, is how many sessions does it typically take if you're doing a mediation, and how long is a typical session? I know earlier you had mentioned an hour, but I didn't know if that was kind of an initial meeting, and if that varies going forward or not.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So the hours that I mentioned, that's just for conflict coaching sessions. When I work with a conflict coaching client, I offer a series of 5 or 6 sessions so that they can learn something and then practice it and then come back. So we work over a period of time with just one person. With facilitated family meetings or elder mediations, I ask people to commit to just one session at a time, but most often it takes at least 2, because in the first session, everybody says where they're at right then, and then we create a topics list, and then we figure out what do people already know and what additional information do they need, and divide up what the information is that they need so that they can research that before a second session. So in the first session, typically people are not quite ready to make decisions. Excuse me. I will have a sip of my tea. Second here. Get a little dry mouth when I'm talking for that long. But I didn't answer your question yet about how long one session is. Now, some mediators, mediate all day. The kind of issues that I help people talk about are so emotional that I don't think that's a good idea, especially if the elder is at the table themselves. So my sessions are typically 3 to 4 hours max. And if the elder is present themselves, what I do is I start late morning, then take a whole hour for lunch, or even longer if the elder is used to taking a nap after lunch. We'll make that possible, and then come back for the second half of the meeting. So I really want to make sure that everybody is fully mentally and emotionally present to the best of their ability throughout the process.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for that. Is there ever a time where you've had to just say, I can't work with this family? I mean, where it just is so hostile?
There have been times, not because they're so hostile. I mean, it's a voluntary process, right? If they're so hostile that they're not willing to come to the table, then there's nothing I can do to help anyway. But the reasons why I would turn down a family is, A, if there is mental health issues involved, because I'm not an expert, obviously, but I know enough after all these years of doing this work and also getting, additional education all the time, to recognize when there are mental health issues that prevent a party from being able to put themselves in another person's shoes. Because if any party can't do that, point for them to be there. It's all about understanding each other and helping them understand each other. So that has happened maybe once or twice that I turned down somebody. If they're not even willing to listen to me and hear and understand what I have to say, I know they're not going to be able to do that with the family members that they have strained relationships with. That's one situation. Another is elder abuse. There is a lot, I would say almost in 50% of the families I work with, somebody accuses somebody of elder abuse. That's not a reason in and of itself for me to turn people down. But if I get the feeling that there is such egregious elder abuse going on that talking things out isn't going to help and somebody really isn't safe, not just about financial issues, but really about physical and emotional safety, then I actually reserve the right to break confidentiality and to report to Adult Protective Services, and people know that from the outset. So those are the two situations where I might turn somebody down. But not in all cases of elder abuse, especially in cases of financial elder abuse. So it's often a family member who's the perpetrator, and it's a slippery slope, and they're not really aware of how wrong it is what they're doing. So in cases like that, I believe that sometimes I can be more helpful than the legal system. So I don't turn those down.
Okay. I was wondering if you were a mandated reporter or not for vulnerable adults. Okay.
Yes, and I'm glad you're asking, because that's another, in a way, advantage over a social worker, because social workers are mandated reporters, whereas mediation confidentiality is protected by law, at least in California and some other states. And so it's a safe place for people to speak openly and honestly about concerns they have about each other's behavior.
Okay. Well, that's a really very important thing to know. That's for sure. People are also probably wondering, where and when you conduct, your meetings, especially I would imagine through COVID, you've been forced to go online, but is that still an option for you? And can you help people, throughout the globe or nationally, or is it just in your state? How does that work?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So, since the kind of mediation I do is not legal in nature, I can really help people anywhere. It's not limited to any state or anything like that. And it could be globally as far as the timing, as long as the timing works out. I had the great good fortune to participate in a training, a 3-day training to become an online mediator, certified online mediator, in the summer of 2019. So I was just getting ready to start offering the service when COVID hit. So I was able to pivot really quickly. And at this point, I'm still offering all my services online. And I've worked with a couple of families in person because they really wanted that, and I said I'm willing to do that as long as we do it outdoors in your backyard. In California, of course, that's an option almost any time of year. So that's been working out pretty well.
Okay.
So it's the client's choice.
Okay.
I mean, I work from my home anyway, so I always arrange meeting places that feel safe and neutral to everybody involved, whether it's their home or whether it's some other place. Sometimes the family home doesn't feel like a neutral place to everybody involved. Then I arrange for, like a little conference room somewhere that's convenient for everybody.
Okay. Now, this is just such a touchy conversation for so many people. I would imagine some people are wondering, do I reach out to her even if I'm not sure the rest of the family will get together and even be in agreement? Is it worth it for them to reach out to you prior and kind of talk things through in terms of how it would look like?
Yes, absolutely. And I encourage people to talk to me first before they talk to family members about the option of maybe having a facilitated family meeting or an elder care mediation. Because if there is strain within the families, typically it's human nature that anything that person A suggests, person B doesn't think is a good idea anyway. So I'd really like to have the opportunity to talk to person A first and confidentially hear what the situation looks like from their perspective. And then we can brainstorm together what we can do to enroll others in at least talking to me without any obligation on their part initially. So the initial conversation with me is up to an hour complimentary anyway. And then if that person wants to work with me, I typically ask them to just pay me for 1 hour to talk to the next person in line so that the second person has the same chance as the first person to talk to me without any obligation on their part. And then, working down the food chain that way. And sometimes so I encourage them to invite the person they think is most open to working with me to be person 2, and then keep working that way through the family system and talk to the most resistant person last. Because if, let's say there are 4 siblings, if 3 already agreed they think a facilitated family meeting is a good idea, and they've already talked to me, it makes it harder for the 4th person to refuse to at least have a conversation with me. And once they do have a conversation with me, because it is confidential and individual, and my purpose really is to understand each person's point of view and show them that I'm empathetic with them wherever they're coming from, it just so increases the chance that they'll, develop a trusting relationship with me and are open to the idea of having me help them talk it out.
Okay, sounds good. if, let's say, in a family, there's only one person who's willing to move forward, do you feel like you can still help them even if the rest of the family won't participate in terms of giving them ideas on how to move forward in a divided environment?
Yes, absolutely. That's where conflict coaching comes in. That's where I help that person with three things, actually. First of all, I help them feel really heard and understood when they've had the experience that they're just banging the head against the wall, right? To have somebody really hear and understand them already gives a sense of relief and renewed clarity and hope. That's the first thing. Second thing is I help them make guesses about where the other people are coming from, so they can gain a new perspective even without talking to the other people. Because if we talk to somebody we're in conflict with, it's really hard to set aside our own position and really try to put ourselves in their shoes, right? But in the safe environment of just working with me, kind of in a role play where I may play the other person, or I may play the client and invite them to play the other person, a new understanding can emerge in a safe environment. And then the third thing is I teach them some of my tools so they can talk to the other people differently and not, get the same defensive or triggering reactions that they have been getting in the past.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, great answer, because I think sometimes people feel so lost when they can't get the family on board. And so to know that you've got those coaching skills to still guide them is a wonderful, wonderful thing regarding that. What kind of training did you need to become an elder mediator, and kind of how did you fall into this space?
Those are two separate questions. I'm going to answer the second question first. As I was approaching 50, I was a long time ago. I really wanted to make a career change, and I was thinking, what do I want to do for the rest of my life that I can do until, a ripe old age, because I don't really foresee ever retiring. And so I spent about a year going to conferences and workshops and networking meetings in the field of aging to see what's out there, because I figured, aging was probably a good field for me, number one, because it's a growing field, and number two, because a lot of in aging are a little older, and life experience is an asset rather than a liability in that field. So after about a year, I met somebody who told me about the profession of elder mediation that back then, over 15 years ago, hardly anybody had heard of, and now still the majority of people haven't heard of, but the word gets out more than it has in the past, thanks to people like you. So then I decided that's for me, because in part because in California it's not a regulated field, so it didn't involve tons of training. I did not want to get another master's or anything like that. And in part because I had been involved in consensus-based organizations and facilitated meetings in other contexts for almost all my adult life. So it really resonated with me and my skill set and my values. So I did what people typically do, is take a 30 to 40-hour basic mediation training, then volunteer for local nonprofit mediation agencies to get experience in any kind of mediation. And then after about a year of that, I actually went to the East Coast. I'm in California, but I went to the East Coast for a 4-day elder mediation training that I really enjoyed a lot, to get the specific skills to feel confident and competent in this area. Because part of the challenge about mediating in this arena is that we don't know what it's like to age until we get there. So it's really hard to put yourself in the other person's shoes, in the elder's shoes, right? So having really training in that area is very, very helpful, and I personally think it's very, very important. I'm involved in the National Association for Conflict Resolution, and we have an elder mediation section, and we feel strongly that people who want to practice in this area really should have specialized training in elder mediation, even though that's not a requirement.
Mhm. Okay. Now, speaking of training, do you do some of that? Do you train others?
I don't offer trainings in elder mediation, but I do offer trainings, two different kinds. One is customized trainings for people who offer aging services, for instance, home care agencies. Sometimes the bigger agencies have funds to bring in external trainers to help them with the communication piece, which is very difficult because not just the intergenerational differences in values and lifestyle that make it hard to put yourself, even as a caregiver, in the shoes of the elder, but also intercultural differences, because the majority of professional caregivers have a different cultural background than their typical clients. So I can really help with trainings and role plays, helping them have more effective conversations with their clients and maybe overcome resistance in those settings, including dementia, of course. Mm-hmm. And this actually brings up something that you haven't asked yet, but I want to say is one of the main tools in my toolkit is what's called compassionate communication, and it's a specific mode of communication that essentially is designed to get people out of their heads and into their hearts and create heart-to-heart understanding and connection. And that is such a useful tool when working with people in the early to mid stages of dementia, because most people in our culture are really stumped when you can't have quote-unquote rational conversations anymore, because our society is so rational-oriented. But I believe that really all of us make our decisions with an emotional component, kind of make gut decisions and then rationalize them. So really being in touch with our feelings and deeper longings helps us understand better where we are coming from, but also helps us understand where the elder is coming from, including the elder with dementia who doesn't make decisions in a quote-unquote rational manner anymore. And that leads me to the second part to my answer to your question, the kind of trainings I offer. I offer a workshop series that's called Heart-to-Heart Conversations about the Challenges of Aging, and it's a series of like 3 to 6 2-hour workshops where I teach the how to apply compassionate communication in the arena of aging, how to express ourselves differently from the heart, how to listen differently from the heart, how to make requests different from the heart, and how to find solutions that meet everybody's needs. And so that's something I did in person for many years before COVID, and now I've been offering it online via Zoom. It's very participatory, and anybody can participate.
Wonderful. We are so in terms of, I think, our thought process. And when you were talking about, compassionate care, I teach in what I call emotional-based training, and I've always said, we've got to get people out of their heart or out of their heads and into their heart. And, just some of the verbiage and stuff we use, it's just kind of amazing. But I think it really is so important for people to take advantage of hearing this, because it makes such a huge difference, not only in how you care for someone else, but how you are perceived and how you feel about yourself as a whole, because part of that, I think, comes into taking care of yourself when you're caring for another person, and a lot of times we don't talk about that. and yet we all know how critical that is. So I really appreciate that you offer those courses to people, because I think it can just make almost be a make or break difference in terms of how they perceive what actually is going on, within their own life, and while caring for somebody else. And I think those things overlap in all of life. Once you learn those lessons, it really makes a huge difference as a whole.
You're making a really good point about the self-care aspect. That's, a lot of caregivers really don't put on the oxygen mask on themselves first.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where self-compassion comes in. I'm actually part of a Mediator's book group as part of my continued education, and right now we're reading a book that's called Self-Compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really been eye-opening to me, how, I teach people compassion for others, but I also focus on teaching self-empathy or self-compassion first, so that it makes it easier for people to be able to put themselves in the shoes of others.
Exactly. And that is, that just makes such a huge difference. And it sometimes amazes me that people don't understand or see that, but it really, it's life-changing. That's all I got to say about it. I know it was for me, and it made it much easier to cope with everything, because really what you're learning is coping skills and finding that balance, and even recognizing what makes you feel good. You're so focused on somebody else, you forget what is it that you need, and then we get out of whack, and that's when I think miscommunications can really divide a family.
Yeah. That's when we come from a place of reacting rather than responding.
Mhm. Exactly. Well, this has just been a wonderful conversation. I know our listeners are getting a lot out of this. You've given so many good tips and things. If people want to find out, where where you're doing your events or when, how would they do that? Do they just go to your website, or?
Yes, the easiest way is to go to my website, www.aginginharmony.com. There is a page for upcoming events. Right now, I have to admit there are no upcoming events on it, but I left last week's series of heart-to-heart conversations last year's on there, so people can see what they look like in case any organization wants to partner with me on offering them. They can see what they look like. I also do have an event that's not up there yet because it's not set in stone yet, but I'm planning to give a workshop, a 2-hour workshop, a Zoom workshop on forgiveness on the journey of aging, together with a colleague who is a forgiveness coach. And we're hoping to do that on July 10th, because July 7th is Global Forgiveness Day, and forgiveness plays such a big role in this context that we're talking about, because part of what's at the root of a lot of tensions later in life among family members is pain from the past. And if we can let go of that, it makes it so much easier to collaborate in the present and plan for the future.
Oh, I totally agree. Now, some people might want to also find a mediator, an elder mediator in their own area, if they're not out in California. Is there a way to do that? Is there a main website to be able to find people?
Yes, there is a kind of a directory to find any kind of mediator. It's called mediate.com. And you can just enter the specialty you're looking for, which could be elder in this particular case. and you enter either your city or your area code, and people in your area will come up. I do want to remind you that since COVID, everybody has moved to offering their services online, and both the technology has developed and our skill sets have developed. And for most families, doing it online might be a good option. Even the elders now have gotten used to being on Zoom. They may not be able to set it up themselves, but so many, like, they see their doctors and all kinds of activities, yoga, all kinds of activities, even for the elders, happen online now, that the comfort level of all generations, I think, is higher, and it opens up new possibilities about bringing families together with ease because they're so spread out. A lot of families are spread out all throughout the country, and it used to be that a lot of my mediations or facilitated family meetings happened around holidays, like right before Thanksgiving or right after Thanksgiving or Christmas or New Year's. I've mediated, the day after Thanksgiving. I've mediated on January 1st. And it's hard for the family. They want to come together and see each other, enjoy the holidays. So, doing things online offers another alternative, and that I can do for people anywhere. Okay, wonderful. And again, to our listeners, you can reach out to Katharina's website, which is www.aginginharmony.com. aginginharmony.com, or her email is her first name, which is KATHARINA@aginginharmony.com. Thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate that. Is there anything that we missed? We've got about 8 minutes left, so if there's something else that I didn't touch on that we should have, please let me know. I don't think there's anything that we missed. I just want to add my phone number, too, because sure. I'm a phone person. So, of course, if people feel more comfortable to contact me through my website or through email, that's totally fine. But my preference is to talk on the phone, which is 510-356-7830. I answer my phone anytime 24/7 if I'm not in a meeting or asleep. So don't worry about time zones. And typically when people first call me, all I do is ask them to look at their calendar, and I look at mine, and we find a time when both of us have time to talk for about an hour on the phone or via Zoom, complimentary, whatever they prefer. So that's the easiest for me, but I think it's also the easiest for them because sometimes, we call back, we email back and forth a long time until we find a time that works for everybody. Yep. Well, that's good, and it's nice to know you answer your phone. I know with me, I usually let it roll into voicemail because I'm just so paranoid of scams and getting numbers that I'm not familiar with. So kudos for you for being brave. Yeah. Because I think it is so much easier to talk something out and pin it down versus, emailing or texting, those types of things that communication, I think, can break down because it is an emotional topic, and, you need to read all of those things into it, and you can't all the time when you're not hearing the tone of voice and how urgent something is might not always come through. So, again, thank you for all these wonderful services that you offer people. This is absolutely fantastic. And I really do think it was a very, very important topic. There are a lot of families that struggle out there, and we do need to get them to that place of peace and comfort so everybody can be their best. And so, again, if you are a family in need of some navigation of difficult situations, especially when it comes to regarding care, Katharina can really help you. So please reach out to her, again, at aginginharmony.com.
Thanks, everybody. Until next week, have a brilliant next few days. We'll talk to you on Tuesday. Bye now.
Thank you, Lori, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank
listeners.
you.
Have a good day. Bye.
Hi, everyone. This is Meredith from the Senior Fitness with Meredith podcast, where I discuss all things for seniors, from fitness, your health and wellness journeys, how to be all over strong and beyond. I also have my mini podcast called Motivation with Meredith. It's a great, quick motivational pick-me-up for your days. Join me, listen now, search for Senior Fitness with Meredith on your favorite podcast platform.